Welcome back to another episode of the Good Question podcast by Coinschedule TV.
Today I had the pleasure of talking with Sunny Singh, the CEO at Hawke Sports. We spoke mainly about the hurdles crypto projects face on becoming successful in today's bear market through effective marketing strategies, as well as the necessity for comprehensive business planning and business modeling. As well as that, we talk about much more. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video and share it with your friends. I hope you enjoy. So, how did you get into cryptocurrencies originally?
So this actually stems from my background within foreign exchange. So I spent over a decade actively working within marketing within several foreign exchange brokers. During my time there, cryptocurrencies were still very much in the infancy. So we're looking at say 2010, 2011. Several of the brokers that I was working for at the time had an active interest within crypto, say more from a project base. And then from that, as the interest grew, it was very much along the lines of, okay, now how could we potentially integrate cryptocurrencies and present them as another trading product? So this effectively occurred towards the end of 2012, 2013. So still very much in the infancy of say cryptos. But even then, brokers were actively seeking or looking at ways, if crypto ever was to take off, how to integrate them into their so-called product mix. So yes, it's been a number of years.
2012, 2013. I had no idea that. This is in London, obviously.
This is in London. I was actually working for a broker at the time, and we were listing Vencoin. There was some eco coin.
Vencoin?
Yeah, should have been back in
2000. No, I'm thinking Venchain. That's different. So okay.
Yeah, it's been back in 2013. It didn't work.
It didn't work.
But yeah, so but obviously, this isn't really news for anyone. The reason being is that obviously, last year, 2017, when the boom actually occurred and crypto did hit the mainstream, every broker on the street then started offering crypto via CFDs. So the plumbing was already in place. Everyone was effectively ready. It was just a case of when liquidity would actually be there.
Okay, do you want to just explain CFT for anyone who's not familiar?
Contracts for difference.
Okay.
It's effectively where you're speculating the price of a particular asset, whether it would increase or actually decrease in value.
And how did they sell? Were they prevalent?
Yeah, from what I recall, as soon as crypto was being offered, there was a huge spike there. As everybody was obviously talking about crypto, towards the tail end of last year, there was this real sense of FOMO. And everybody wanted to clamber on and see if they could get involved.
That's interesting. Because I wonder now how many of the conventional finance guys who transferred over to blockchain and crypto at the end of last year, they're sorely regretting that decision. There must be quite a few. There must be.
You mean buying out the peak?
Well, no, I mean like all these companies that are like, right, blockchain's a new thing, cryptocurrency's a new thing, we'll hire in a bunch of crypto analysts, we'll make this our new thing, and then suddenly the market crashes. They've lost their old clients, and now the market's tanked, and there's nothing left for them to do.
Well, with FX brokers, they still have FX.
Right. Okay.
Crypto is effectively just another asset which is being kind of tagged on. So the brokers haven't really suffered too much. In terms of their particular client base, it's either they're speculating. Currencies, or they're speculating crypto versus existing fiat currencies. So it's just another pair that kind of gets tagged on into the mix there, really.
And so when did you decide to work so closely with cryptocurrency projects?
So this would have been after I left FX there, really. Yeah. So I started Hawke Sports. So Hawke Sports is a full-service sports marketing agency which assists brands operating within the blockchain and crypto sector. This is to assist with their marketing and brand awareness, either via sports sponsorships or ambassadors. The reason for that is the way the crypto market is right now, or has been, over the past couple of years is very similar to what actually occurred within the foreign exchange sector straight after the financial crisis back in 08-09, where there was a lot of regulatory restrictions which have actively placed upon the products and services and how they could be marketed to a retail public. Such as the appropriate disclaimers being put in place, certain markets which are actively closed off. And that's very similar to what's actually occurred within crypto, especially this year. After 2017, there was a lot of advertising restrictions which were put on from incumbents such as Google, Facebook, Reddit, and so forth, who actually clamped down and said no crypto advertising, no blockchain advertising. So similar to what actually occurred within FX, we kind of identified a requirement there as to how these companies, within this particular sector, could actually market themselves to mass retail. So yeah.
And do you think those restrictions have worked in terms of protecting investors?
I think, are these restrictions in terms of advertising or proposed regulation?
Well, in terms of regulation of advertisement, because as you say, this happened in 2008, and what happened in 2008 was that people were buying financial products that they were told were AAA class rated, although if you actually looked at the underlying assets, they were, was it D or E or barely were, it wouldn't, these assets were toxic at the very best.
That's true.
So these restrictions, I presume, were put in place to stop that happening again, which makes sense. And I was just wondering if you think the crypto regulations have helped minimize the false advertisement in the crypto world, and if that's protected investors in any way.
I must state straight off the bat though, I'm actually pro-regulation.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
I think regulation is a good thing. I firmly believe that regulation will be coming into play. Not yet, obviously, but within the next 2 to 5 years, there will be some form of global regulatory framework, regarding crypto products. The SEC is obviously leading the charge on that right now. But with that, yes, as regulation comes into play, it is very much along the lines of actually, protecting those investors. I actually read an interesting stat that 85% of the ICOs launched towards the end of last year and this year were actually so-called scams though, right? If that stat is correct, then yes, most definitely there needs to be some form of regulation, in which to protect any speculators or even investors as such.
Yeah, well, because obviously we work as an ICO company, and
yes.
Alex said that he quoted that statistic. Alex, my CEO, quoted that statistic.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Well, he quoted it in a speech and said that he did some digging into how they actually gauged that. And apparently the researchers, if they went onto the Reddit page of an ICO and someone said this is a scam, they qualified that as a scam. But people say that all the time. It's such a tribal, toxic community that people are throwing the word scam left, right, and centre. As well as that, if a project offers targets that it intends to achieve but can't achieve them because of technical infeasibility or some restrictions or whatever, is it a scam if they don't meet them? I don't know. I do agree with you that the market is definitely overpopulated with scams. It's also definitely overpopulated with projects that can't deliver on their desired outcomes and what they market themselves as. But I think there are still some golden nuggets out there.
Oh, completely agree though, yes.
Do you agree? Yeah. I think so for sure. I was just wondering, so for a crypto company that comes and approaches you and they ask you to go deliver their product to market, and they say to you, what is the biggest hurdle that we have getting ourselves to be a successful company, to be a successful project, what do you tell them the greatest factor is?
Your route to market strategy.
Okay.
And let's make no bones about it. The crypto world or blockchain world right now is still very much in its infancy. What's actually occurred is there's been a lot of great ideas that have actually sought investment, whether via an ICO or private funding, to actually develop products and services which are still yet to come into fruition or have come into fruition. What then occurs next is that once that product or service is built, just like any other company, any other product or service, is how do you then market this for it to actually reach the public? And there seems to be, which kind of fits in quite nicely with that, with that Reddit comment which you just mentioned, is that there's an over-reliance on the community. Even the price of Bitcoin right now, or even other altcoins, is still very much sentiment-led. And if the industry is to mature, which it will do, it needs to move away from that over-reliance of the community as a whole.
And where would they move their reliance towards if it's away from the community?
I would say mass public there, right? We are talking about Joe Public here. Probably the best example I can give you is crypto exchanges. Well, there are currently over 250 crypto exchanges operating right now, all of which are actively competing for the same community audience. That's anything from 500,000 to 3 million users globally. None of them have effectively marketed their products or services beyond that, even though there is a requirement there from Joe Public in which to actually get involved. And it's surprising to see, well, I would say not surprising to see when actually speaking with these, with these brands, every one of them is actively stating that they've reached saturation point, in terms of user acquisition, and their trading volumes are actually stagnating as well. It's not declining.
And so what would be your way of getting across the Joe Public? What's your strategy that you tend to go for the most?
In what, sorry?
So you say that the community is over-relied on and you need to reach Joe Public. How would you recommend to reach Joe Public?
Oh, using the traditional marketing mix there, right?
Okay.
And this goes beyond Telegram.
Yeah. Damn, but I love Telegram so much.
Yeah, I know. It's a very effective marketing tool, and I completely appreciate and understand as to why any project being launched or any project that has actually come into fruition, as to why they would effectively market to the community at large. These are the guys that have actually supported them from the start. They would actually actively want to give back to the community. But truth be told, when regulation comes into play, there will be a cull which actually occurs across the industry. And it is those guys who have firmly cemented their positions within the market, and I mean the whole market as opposed to just community market, who will actually survive.
Okay.
And I know it's a bit of a risk, as in, sticking your head above water and actively stating that you are here and that you want to play ball with the regulators there, right? But it will need to occur.
So you think that marketing your product beyond the crypto community to the community at large is an indicator to the regulators that you want to be playing by the rules?
Yeah, which I think some companies are naturally hesitant towards. But it is something which they will need to accept for long-term survival.
Which project do you think has done the right strategy, which you would look at and model everything that you try and do after?
I say Coinbase has done incredibly well with this, though. Effectively, they make no bones about who they are, but also make no bones about them actively working, with regulators in which to actively promote their products and services. And it's worked. They are the go-to guys for anyone outside of the immediate community in which to actually purchase crypto.
No, I agree completely. I think Coinbase is a very valuable asset for the whole crypto community, because you can point to them and say, these guys haven't been hacked, they're working very closely with the regulators, and it's super easy to use. And that's one of the problems at the moment with the crypto, especially for people who have no real understanding of it. They go onto an exchange and like, what is a private key? What is a public key? Like, how the hell do you even go about doing this?
Yeah, well, it's actually, it's funny you mention that, because you see the banks right now, are still actively holding off in introducing their own crypto offerings to Joe Public. But challenger banks have already started, dipping their toe into the water. So if you look at the likes of, say, Revolut, I've actually got Revolut, on my phone, and there is a crypto wallet offering there, which, if you think about it, makes sense. because moving forward, every bank will naturally start offering their own crypto wallet solutions where you'll be able to pick and choose as to what currency you actively pay within. Which then kind of leads me back to my earlier argument, as in, what are the existing crypto wallet providers, which there are a lot of, actively doing in terms of securing their longevity within the market? Because as soon as the banks start offering this, this particular service, they've already got the user base there. They can actively switch it on, and they know that 90% of these guys will actively use that particular service. So how are the other third party crypto wallet providers actually going to be competing against the banks?
And if they came to you and said, we are worried that the banks are about to do their own wallet service, what would you say to them to maintain their position in the market in the face of this institutional?
Well, we're already actively speaking with a number of crypto wallet providers now in terms of their particular marketing strategies, how they can effectively target their demographic, actually within those regions, that they're actively wanting to really cement their market position within. And it's quite interesting is that, and it's through no fault of their own, and we would say the same with any company which we're actively engaged with. It is education. Now remember, this is very much a tech-focused product. Marketing is very much a mindset, in terms of raising awareness. And what I mean by that, though, there's different facets and different channels in which to actively engage your end user with your particular product or service. It's not a one-shoe-fits-all model. So it's really engaging with the business to understand what their requirements are, but also educating them to the premise that, hey, unless you start doing something now, you may not be here in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. It's all great now, but as soon as one of the, I hate to use the phrase, but as soon as one of the big boys actually turns on their own products or services, there's no way you'll be able to compete, because no one knows who you are right now outside of the active community.
And so do you go and approach these various wallet providers and say, we are offering this service, but we want your best intentions in mind, say you really need to understand, or do you get approached by these wallet guys who have already alerted themselves to the threats?
I say it's a bit of both. When we first began, it was very much us going out into the market. We're very fortunate now to have kind of turned the corner where brands are actively coming to us, especially right now, within this market downturn, where they are, a lot of their holdings are within crypto, and they're realizing that, okay, so we are very much affected by the market. If it goes any lower, then we could effectively cease to exist. So how do we secure our market position? How do we secure our product longevity? So it's kind of working well for us right now.
And your particular USP with your company is to take the sports advertising route. Is that fair?
Yeah, so it could be sports advertising, or it could be brand ambassadors. So for us, it's effectively building brand awareness. Earlier we were talking about the example of why an individual would purchase a Gucci handbag as opposed to a Sports Direct bag. It's more to do with the packaging of that product, and brand awareness as opposed to anything else. So really, price differentiation doesn't really come into play. There is this perception of a Gucci handbag being worth more than, say, a Sports Direct handbag. Really.
Yeah, well, I wonder how much the cost of production differs. Probably not.
I'm not too sure.
Probably not even more different. And so you spoke earlier about the conventional marketing skills playing more of a part now in the crypto world. Do you see that trend continuing in the convergence of crypto community advertising and conventional advertising?
Yes, most definitely. Well, let's look at the crypto community as a whole, or what's occurred so far, especially in the sense of ICOs. Before 2017, ICOs were actively taking place there, right? 2017, there were just over 400 ICOs, raised, I what was it, over 6 billion?
I wouldn't be surprised. EOS made 4 just by themselves, so I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
But the way those ICOs were actively marketed was directly to the community. So it was using those marketing practices, even marketing jargon that would actively appeal to the community, as a whole. Then you start looking towards the end of the year. All of a sudden, FOMO kicks in. Joe Public wants to get involved, with crypto, and ICOs start changing, in the way that they're actually messaging their so-called products. So it's all of a sudden you're going from very much jargon-led, say, messaging to something that's a lot more, I hate to use the phrase, but a lot more dumbed down.
Yeah.
It's a lot more accessible. Even in terms of fundraising, it's not so much about transferring coins into a particular wallet. They can start accepting debit and credit card payments. So the change within marketing, actually within that particular sector, is already in effect. But it needs to go one step beyond though. We need to start, or a lot of the companies start looking at their long-term plans. Their actual, I'd say, corporate development strategies, and then obviously how marketing then falls into the mix of that though.
So I never actually thought of that, but you're definitely right in the sense that Precept 2017, when it was the early adopters, it was very much a technical. The projects would try and raise funding by appealing to the most technical in the communities, and then those most technical in the communities might write a review of the ICO, and that was picked up by the less technical but still early adopters. And then when 2017 happened, it just turned into, I remember the blockchain. It's so amazing looking back on the blockchain craze back then. I remember there was a company called Long Island Iced Tea, and then they changed the name to Long Island Iced Tea Blockchain Corporation.
Oh, yes, I heard about this.
Their stock went 300% in.
That's like Kodak as well. There.
Oh my god, it's everyone. Yeah, Kodak coin. What the hell? How is that even possible?
Yeah.
So obviously we went from technical to conventional, and where do you see us going in the long term, in the next couple of years? Where do you see that evolving into?
Oh, I think in terms of accessibility, that would only increase. Even if you look at the projects themselves, from what they were to what they are now, though, they were very technical, in terms of the actual projects or tokenization of projects, which were actively being promoted, versus now where you could effectively tokenize anything, but it's much more understandable as to what that utility token would actually be used for. For example, a advertising platform where those users who are actively engaging with a particular advert would then be remunerated within the platform's token. That's a much more accessible message for the guy on the street, as opposed to some form new form of blockchain, which would then integrate with a platform over here, and then which would then mean the tokenization of XYZ over there. I'm already lost on that myself.
And we spoke earlier about regulation and how that's having an effect. And one of the problems with these messages being dumbed down in the 2017 wave was that people could essentially mislead their users on what was actually on offer, because when you speak in generic terms with blockchain, it's super easy to mislead someone, because you can say, I'm a blockchain company. Well, are you a private blockchain or are you a public blockchain company? And that's a very significant difference between them. But when you just say I'm a blockchain company, it's very misleading. So do you think that the integration of new laws and regulations might actually make the advertising less dumb, more specific, more kind of going back to pre-2017 in a sense?
I think it'll work both ways. For those projects which are very much for the average consumer, regulation would actively allow for clear messaging to actively state what that product or service is. For those projects which are very much focused on infrastructure, then yes, the technicalities would obviously have to be explained a lot further as well.
And you said that it's going to lead to a cull of all of the kind of like what happened in the dot-com bubble.
Exactly.
Do you see a comparison between the two? What happened then? What's happening now?
Crypto always gets compared to the dot-com bubble. Yes.
Yeah.
Long and short of it is, so yes. But then with that, what we're looking at is effectively, the next wave of titans. We are looking at, what will then occur. We are looking now at the next Amazons, the next eBays, or Facebooks and so forth. Or, Google. It's going to be amazing to see as to how or what really occurs, within the next 5 to 10 years. I'm an active believer though that those companies who are to survive, they really need to actually build their foundations now.
Build their foundations, and can you elaborate on what that means?
So foundations is looking at their corporate structures, looking at their corporate development, actively looking at their marketing plans.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. Sunny, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Thanks
I really
so much.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thanks for watching.